What's up guys, today we're going to be going over the 3 best PvE loadouts this season. Usually after the first few weeks of the season, once I get all the new stuff, kind of figure out what is going on, I like to put out a video on the main loadouts I'm using this season, and that is what this video will be. There'll be 3 in here, so let's go and begin with the first one. The first one will revolve around the Deathbringer, which is one of the best single target DPS weapons in the entire game. It's kind of a jack of all trades, good at a little bit of everything. Then we'll be using the Ikelos SMG for Warmind cells. Then finally, in our connect slot, we'll be using the Ignition Code, which is a GL that can get all kinds of cool rolls. I'll be making a video on this GL soon, but the one I'm using today is Blinding Grenades and also Danger Zone to increase the radius of the blinding. And now looking at the armor and mods for this build, we're going to be using Verity's Brow on Warlock because we'll be using the Ikelos SMG for our main Acler weapon, so we'll be proccing that perk all the time. But the main mod we'll be using from Artifact is Breach and Clear for that 30% debuff on our GL. Now on top of that, whenever we proc the debuff, it will also reload all of our stowed weapons, which will pair very nicely with Deathbringer. Then for the mods, we'll be using the 3 Warmind cell mods, Global Reach, Wrath of Rasputin, then Rage of the Warmind. Then on top of that, the other 2 mods, the first will be Warmind's Decree, which will allow us to create Warmind cells from our Deathbringer, then also from our subclass, and that's why I recommend using Avoid subclass no matter which character you're using. On Warlock, I pair it with Devour or Top Tree Woodwalker. Then for the 5th mod slot, you can pretty much use whatever you want. You can't use something like Charger Light because you need 2 slots to make Charger Light work, so I just use another Warmind cell mod, for example, Hammer of the Warmind from the Artifact, which will stun Overload and then also Unstoppable Champions, which is pretty cool. So overall, this is one of my favorite builds this season. It is the best for just general use, and you can use this on any character in the game, and you have pretty much everything covered. You have your Blinding GL, which is one of the most underrated things in PvE. Pretty much makes it so no enemy in the game can shoot you, which is extremely good for any type of content in the game, even something like GM Nightfalls. This will just keep you alive in so many different situations. Then you have the Ikelos SMG and the Warmind cell mods, which is the best actor in the history of the game. Then you have the Deathbringer for those single targets, for example, champions, mini bosses, and even bosses. And what I do for that is I shoot my Deathbringer, then pull out my GL and hit them with a GL to proc Breach and Clear, which will debuff the enemy before the Deathbringer hits them, then also reload your Deathbringer for the next target, or if you're on a boss, you can just shoot 2 Deathbringers in a row without having to reload. And you can make this build work even better for champions. What you can do is use Unstoppable GL. You can also use Overload SMG. The only one you'll be missing is Anti-Barrier. What you can do is just shoot the Deathbringer at the champion, then hit it with the Breach and Clear GL, and all that damage should kill the champion before it can even put up its shield. So pretty much this build works for all 3 champions. Really good at pretty much any content you throw it at, and overall one of my favorite builds this season. Now moving on to the second build, which will be a rework of my Stasis build from last season with the Stasis turrets. First we'll be using Fatebringer with Firefly as our primary choice this season. Then we still have the Salvo with Chain Reaction, which is one of the best actor weapons in the game and one of the most fun. Then you can use whatever exotic heavy you want. You can use something like Lament, Deathbringer, or even Anarchy. For this build I usually stick with the Lament. Then our exotic armor piece of choice will be Verity's Brow once again, and this build, unlike the previous one, will be pretty much just a Warlock one. Then we have Blast Radius from the Artifact because it only costs 1 energy. Then we have 4 copies of Firepower, which will give us pretty much like 65-70% of our grenade back instantly whenever we throw it. But most importantly, we have Energy Accelerant from the Artifact, which will double the damage of our Chain Reaction on Salvo, then also Firefly on our Fatebringer. Then looking at my Stasis build, the most important thing is Bleak Watcher Aspect. Then you can see the rest of my aspects and fragments right here. And overall, this build is still absolutely insane. The Salvo is even better than it was last season. Pretty much anything you hit with the Salvo Explosion is just dead. Double damage on top of one of the best accurate perks in the entire game is just absolutely absurd. Then you have the Fatebringer with the same double damage for Firefly, which is also extremely good. If you've never seen this build before, pretty much how it works is you just get a double kill with Salvo to become Charger Light. Then you just convert your grenade into a Stasis turret, and next thing you know, you have 15 of them on the ground. Nothing can move. Everything's either slowed or frozen instantly. And then you just hit them with Salvo, which will kill pretty much all of them because of the Chain Reaction, and then also the enemy shattering because they're frozen, which will then give you another stack of Charger Light, throw down another turret, which will also reload your Salvo if you have demo on it. And yeah, that is pretty much the entire loop of the build. It just works forever. Next thing you know, the entire room can't move, and it's still one of my favorite builds of all time. And you could even make this build really good for champions if you wanted. You could use Unstoppable GL, Overload Hand Cannon, then the Lament for Anti-Barrier. So overall, this build got even better this season, and as I mentioned, it already was one of my favorite builds of all time, so definitely use this if you're a Warlock main. And finally, the third build I find myself swapping to a lot this season is just Anarchy plus Double Slug for boss fights. I pretty much use the 2 previous builds for everything in the game, and when I get to a raid boss, I swap over to this, and that is pretty much the 3 things I use. And the reason this build is so good this season is because of Breach and Clear, and the way it works with Anarchy pretty much just turns it into a permanent debuff that will also reload your weapons every 10 seconds. And you don't even necessarily need to use Double Slug for this to be a good build. You can use something like a Sniper for range, you can swap off one of these slugs for a primary. Just overall, pairing something with Anarchy this season is extremely strong because of Breach and Clear, and I think that build will also be really good for GMs. I'll be making a different video on those builds once we get a little bit closer to that. So that is pretty much it for the video. The 3 builds I find myself using this season. The first one is all around one of the most solid builds in the game that can be used on any character. Then the second build is pretty much only on Warlock, but results in one of the most dominant builds in the history of the game that you can pretty much just single-handedly control an entire raid just yourself. And finally, the third build is pretty much just for boss fights, and those are the things I use this season. Anyways, let me know what you've been using this season yourself, or if you plan on using one of these builds right here. Anyways, the rest of the video will just be some strike gameplay with the first 2 builds. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.